Emily Thompson stepped out of her compact fourth-floor walk-up in Park Slope, Brooklyn. The early morning sun, still weak, sliced through the canyons of brownstones and apartment buildings, illuminating the streets with a hazy, amber glow. The air was thick with the rumble of the B67 bus and the distant, familiar shriek of a subway train pulling into the station. She took a deep, deliberate breath, the kind you take when you're trying to physically push down a rising panic but a restless energy. A potent sense of preaching jitters was already vibrating beneath her skin. She knew, with the unsettling certainty of a protagonist in a good New York story, that today was going to be that day. Emily was meeting Jack Miller, her college best friend and longtime emotional anchor, at their usual spot, Brooklyn Brew, at 9 a.m. sharp. The text from Jack last night had looped in her head like a troublesome earworm. "We need to talk. This is important." 9 a.m. Brew, simple, unadorned, but it had sent her pulse racing. She kept glancing at her reflection in the glass of a closed deli, wondering if the turbulence she felt inside was already visible on the surface. Had Jack figured out the secret she'd been carrying? And if he had, what then? Her walk was a typical Brooklyn ballet. She dodged a man walking a fluffy golden doodle, sidestepped a spilled cup of coffee near the scaffolding, and waited impatiently as a yellow cab, horns blaring, executed an aggressive ute. The cacophony, the rhythm of shouting, the grind of the trash truck, the endless hustle was the white noise of her life. She clutched her worn leather tote, her hands slightly damp, trying to compartmentalize the swirling mess, the meeting, the looming confession, the sickening knot of anxiety that kept tightening in her chest. The moment Emily pushed open the door to Brooklyn Brew, the familiar blast of dark roast coffee and warm air hit, instantly dropping her shoulders a fraction. It felt like coming home. Jack was exactly where he always was, at their corner table, next to the window overlooking the street. He looked up, his expression serious, though a faint, concerned smile touched his lips as he saw her. Emily walked over and slid into the booth across from him. The silence that fell between them was heavy, crackling with unspoken tension, the kind of silence only two people who know each other too well can produce. "All right, spill it. What's going on?" Jack asked, his voice low, cutting straight to the chase with the no-nonsense efficiency she adored. Emily looked down at the latte the waiter placed in front of her, swirling the foam with a cinnamon stick, buying herself a precious few seconds. She knew that the next sentence was the fuse. "Okay," deep breath, she whispered to herself before starting. "Jack, I ran into someone this week, and it kind of threw my whole world off its axis. I don't know what to do." Jack's easygoing demeanor vanished. He frowned, his eyes narrowing with a familiar protective instinct. Emily's heart seized. She knew holding back now would only make the crash harder. "Who did you run into, and how serious is off its axis?" he pressed, the tone equal parts worried friend and investigative reporter. Emily hesitated, then confessed. "It was an old flame from back in the day, someone I thought was ancient history, and running into him, it was like being hit by a freight train. I feel completely blindsided, and I'm terrified of what this means." Jack leaned back against the booth, crossing his arms. He studied her, the way a person studies a complicated math problem. He knew Emily was disciplined, the kind of person who always had a 5-year plan, and seeing her this visibly rattled was genuinely concerning. The low thrum of indie jazz and the clinking of mugs in the crowded cafe provided the soundtrack to their high-stakes drama. "Look, I get it. The ghost of an ex popping up is always a trip," Jack said, his voice dropping to a serious tone that cut through the noise. "But you know how complicated this is, right? You know how much you have to lose." Emily nodded, relieved that he hadn't judged her, but the anxiety was still a cold fist around her heart. She began pouring out the details, the small, almost insignificant moments of their encounter that had felt monumental to her. The way his eyes still crinkled when he laughed, how he mentioned a shared inside joke, the way he made those old, buried memories suddenly feel vibrant and possible again. Jack listened, silent, occasionally giving a slight, supportive nod. He understood that she wasn't looking for advice yet. She needed a sounding board, a witness to her breakdown. Emily felt a small measure of relief, but it was coupled with the terrifying realization that the next decision she made would be the most consequential she'd faced in years. Time seemed to warp in that moment. Emily looked out the window at the flashing lights of the emergency services and the hurried commuters. She wondered if the whole city, the entire block of 4th Avenue, was waiting for her to make her move. Did she have the guts to lean into this powerful, potentially destructive feeling, or would she tuck tail and run? "Jack, do you think I should see him again, or do I cut and run before it gets messy?" she asked, her voice barely a tremor. Jack met her gaze, his expression thoughtful. Emily, that's not my call. The most important thing is figuring out what you actually want, deep down. If you decide to go all in, you need to prepare for all possible consequences. And you need to look hard at the collateral damage. Who else is in the line of fire of this decision? Emily nodded again, a rush of cold clarity washing over the panic. He was right. From this moment on, every step mattered. Every word, every glance, would have ramifications. She looked at Jack, seeing the deep concern in his eyes, and knew that at least for today, she didn't have to navigate this dangerous territory alone. The cafe was still buzzing, but Emily was only focused on the narrative unfolding in her own mind. She recalled all the previous times she had tried to suppress her emotions, to simply move on from the past. But now, it had surged back, more alive and stronger than ever. A mix of sheer terror and exhilarating possibility bubbled up inside her. Jack reached across the table and placed his hand briefly over hers. A simple, grounding gesture. We'll figure this out. Emily, you're going to be okay. Emily managed a shaky smile. The confusion hadn't left, but the crippling loneliness had. She knew, regardless of the outcome, that today was the kickoff to a brand new chapter, one where feelings, friendship, and personal choice would wrestle for control. She sat there, absorbing the jazz, the energy of New York, and the realization that sometimes life comes down to these small, powerful moments where a chance encounter, a simple feeling, can redraw the entire map of your future, and she was ready to face it. Emily left Brooklyn Brew, the combination of profound relief and residual anxiety lingering like the faint smell of roasted coffee on her jacket. She walked aimlessly down the foggy Brooklyn street, each step on the damp sidewalk heavy with the burden of her unresolved thoughts. The yellow cabs still whizzed by, the incessant horns still blared, each sharp sound making her jump. The city's relentless energy felt jarringly out of sync with the agonizing slowness of her own racing heart. She kept replaying Jack's reaction. On one hand, his non-judgmental stance was a comfort. He was her rock, her safe harbor. But the other, darker part of her couldn't shake the fear, a terrifying dread that the emotions now surfacing would shatter everything. Not just the delicate balance of her current life, but her vital, foundational friendship with Jack. When she finally made it back to her apartment, the silence was deafening. She could practically hear the echo of her own pulse. She shed her coat, dropped her tote bag, and sank onto the window seat. Outside, the afternoon light was already turning that distinct, late-day gold, casting long, sharp shadows across the street. She felt the internal tug-of-war acutely, the desperate urge to bury the past versus the undeniable force that kept pulling her back to the image of her old flame. Her phone buzzed, cutting through the stillness. A text from Jack. You holding up? Let me know if you need a round two. A wave of warmth washed over her. She typed back immediately. I'm okay, but still a mess. Can you swing by for 5 minutes? Within 15 minutes, Jack was knocking softly. He stepped inside, his smile tight but his eyes radiating serious concern. Just wanted eyes on you, he said, his voice calm. Emily let him in, grateful for his steady presence even as her nerves continued to fray. They sat on the worn sofa. Jack looked at her, his expression softening slightly. So, this old friend, did he hint at anything, or was this strictly a cosmic coincidence? Emily searched for the right words. I'm not sure. He definitely seemed interested. Maybe, but honestly, I don't even know what my feelings are, Jack. I'm just completely off balance. Jack nodded slowly, his gaze turning thoughtful. Emily, this all starts with radical honesty with yourself. If you don't get clarity on what you're feeling, every decision you make from here on out is going to be built on shaky ground. Emily sighed, feeling both relieved by his logic and utterly overwhelmed by the task. Jack was right. But confronting a decade of buried feelings felt like a Herculean effort. Just then, her phone buzzed again, this time with a different, more potent jolt. It was the old flame. Emily, I need to see you again tonight. We need to talk this out. It's important. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Jack, worried that the sudden development would confirm his fears. But Jack just watched her, his eyes calm and empathetic. That's your move. You have to make the call. But just remember, every choice comes with a consequence. Taking a deep, shaky breath, Emily typed her reply. Okay, tonight it is. A mixture of apprehension and breathless anticipation surged through her. Jack simply gave a silent, grave nod. The silence that followed was charged, filled only by the ticking of the clock and Emily's frantic heartbeat. The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Emily tried to work from home, but the image of her ex, now named Michael, in her mind kept eclipsing her screen. She ran through imagined conversations, analyzing his past gestures, his current tone. The anxiety and indecision were a physical vice around her chest. Evening arrived, and Emily dressed with deliberate care, choosing a simple, elegant dark dress for the neutral Manhattan cafe where they had agreed to meet. As she stepped back out onto the street, the orange glow of the streetlights painted harsh lines across the crosswalks, an ominous pattern reflecting the confusion on her face. The cafe in Manhattan's West Village was quieter, more intimate than Brooklyn Brew. Emily scanned the room, and there he was, Michael Toll, leaning against the counter, his eyes already searching for her. Her heart did a painful flip. He saw her, and a reserved, familiar smile appeared. "Emily, it's been too long," he said, his voice deep and warm, exactly as she remembered. She walked over and sat down opposite him. They started with the superficial, her job, his recent move, catching up on the years. But beneath the surface-level talk, the air was thick, pressurized. There was an invisible, volatile element waiting to ignite. As they talked, Emily realized the extent of her confusion. Part of her was genuinely happy and energized by his presence, a powerful pull of nostalgia and attraction, but another part was gripped by fear, standing firmly on the edge of a precipice, debating whether to pull back or take the terrifying leap. She looked out the window at the brightly lit city, the cabs tearing through the night, and knew this conversation was a seismic event. Michael leaned forward, his casual demeanor dropping away, his voice hushed and serious. "Emily, I want to be honest. We missed our moment years ago, for all kinds of reasons. But seeing you now, I need to know where you stand. If there's still anything there, anything at all, I need you to be straight with me." Emily froze. Her heart hammered wildly, her hands trembling slightly on the edge of the table. This was a moment of truth, a moment that could redraw her map, potentially fracturing not only her settled life but her rock-solid foundation with Jack. She took a long, steadying breath, meeting his gaze. "Michael, I don't know. I'm still figuring things out. I'm completely overwhelmed, but I can't deny what I'm still feeling." Michael nodded slowly, his eyes gentle but resolute. "Your feelings matter, Emily. I'm not pressuring you, but I needed the truth to know what I'm dealing with." The fear didn't leave her, but a strange sense of clarity and relief took its place. She knew, whatever the outcome, she was finally facing her truth. They continued to talk, sharing fragments of their lost years, but the tension was ever present, the past echoing in every word. Emily felt her heart rate slowly stabilize, but she knew the true challenge lay ahead, navigating this resurfaced connection with Michael, and the inevitable, painful confrontation she would have to face with Jack, the one person she desperately didn't want to hurt. When she left the cafe, stepping back into the bright lights of a Manhattan night, Emily felt a dizzying mix of relief and anxiety. She knew her journey had only just begun. The decisions ahead would be agonizing, emotional, and potentially life-altering. Emily took a deep breath, looked up at the glittering skyscrapers piercing the New York sky, and whispered to herself, "Be strong, be honest." Walking down the wet sidewalk, she felt every step, heavy with consequence, but powered by a new determination. The path forward was still shrouded in mist, but Emily Thompson was finally ready to walk it. The next morning, Emily woke to the oppressive weight of unresolved turmoil. A fine, persistent drizzle was washing down the Brooklyn windows, mirroring the bleak mood settling over her. She nursed a cup of coffee, staring at her phone, unwilling to tap into the accumulating texts from either Michael or Jack. Notification felt like a tiny electric shocker, mixture of desperate anticipation and deep-seated dread. She tried to tell herself she needed a day of quiet contemplation, a moment of New York zen, but the city rarely afforded that luxury. The familiar symphony of horns, the hurried slap of boots on the wet sidewalk, the distant, barking loudspeaker, it all reminded her that the world kept spinning, even while her internal compass was wildly swinging. Seeking refuge, Emily decided to walk toward Prospect Park, a familiar landscape where she'd often run or read. The familiarity of the tall oaks and the winding paths offered a small measure of comfort, but the weight of her recent conversations was still palpable. As she passed the glistening rain-damp benches, she kept recalling the previous night's meeting with Michael, his earnest gaze, his low, warm voice, and the raw honesty that had left her feeling both exposed and strangely validated. During her walk, a slow, dawning realization began to form. The immediate spark with Michael was undeniably powerful, magnetic pull toward a familiar past. Yet, simultaneously, She recognized the unwavering steadiness of Jack. He was her constant, the one standing patiently on the sidelines, ready to listen and protect her equilibrium. Emily felt the profound split between her heart and her logic. She wanted to follow the excitement, but she was terrified of the collateral damage to those she cared about. Her phone buzzed, pulling her abruptly from her thoughts. It was Jack. "Got some time free today? Need to talk it out? Let me know." Emily hesitated for only a moment. She knew she couldn't delay this conversation. "Yes, meet you at the usual spot." She told herself this meeting wasn't just to talk. It was a necessity, a way to force clarity and find the right direction. That when Emily arrived at the cafe, Jack was already settled at their corner table. His eyes held the usual depth of care, but there was a new, subtle firmness to his gaze, an acknowledgement of the heavy emotional baggage she was now carrying. She slid into the booth, letting out a long, ragged exhale. Jack waited silently for a moment before speaking. "Emily, I know you saw Michael last night. Are you okay?" Emily dropped her gaze, struggling to keep her voice steady. "No, I'm not okay. I'm overwhelmed, Jack. I don't know how to handle what I'm feeling." Jack looked at her, his expression quiet but infused with steady patience. "Look, you need to strip everything else away and figure out what you want for yourself right now, before anything else. Every other decision flows from that one truth." Hearing Jack articulate the core issue provided a strange, stabilizing relief. In this fraught moment, she recognized that radical self-honesty was the only path forward. But that path required balancing Michael's feelings and, crucially, protecting Jack, the person she trusted implicitly. They talked for a long time, circling around life changes, work stress, and future dreams. But the electric tension never left the air. It was a constant reminder that her emotional decision-making was the true subject of the meeting. Jack listened with focused intensity, his presence a silent guarantee of safety and support. Emily realized she needed more time. She couldn't rush into meeting Michael again without fully processing her own heart. She couldn't let impulsive emotion dictate consequences that would affect everyone that she left the cafe. Stepping back onto the wet Brooklyn pavement, Emily felt a mixture of relief and persistent strain. She knew this was far from over. The decisions ahead would test her relationship with both men. Yet, she had taken a crucial step, confronting her authentic feelings and speaking that truth out loud. Emily walked home, taking deep, clean breaths, focusing on the vibrant hustle of New York around her. The anxiety hadn't vanished, but she had moved forward today, facing the emotion, sharing the struggle, and preparing herself for the challenging, necessary steps that lay ahead. That evening, Brooklyn was enveloped in a thin, misty fog. The streetlights cast fuzzy, elongated reflections on the wet asphalt left by the afternoon rain. Emily sat in her small apartment, phone in hand, staring at the screen with a growing sense of dread. Michael's last text still glowed. "Meeting tonight. Hope you're doing okay." She let out a weary sigh. Her mind was a chaotic tangle. The resurfaced connection with Michael, the deep anxiety over her friendship with Jack, and the crushing weight of knowing that any choice she made would be life-altering. Emily tried to impose calm on herself, but her heart refused to cooperate. Before she could allow herself to leave, Emily instinctively dialed Jack. I'm meeting Michael tonight. I don't know what to say to him." Her voice was shaky, betraying her confusion. Jack took a long breath on the other end. His voice, low and steady, was exactly what she needed. "Emily, you have to remember that being honest with yourself is the only thing that matters right now. I'll always be in your corner, but this decision is yours and yours alone." After the call, a flicker of relief settled in, but the anxiety remained a constant, dull ache beneath her ribs. She dressed carefully in a simple, sophisticated dark outfit, attempting to project a stability she didn't feel. Tonight, she knew, was the make-or-break moment. Would she choose the path of passion, or the path of reason and stability? Emily arrived at the Manhattan Cafe. Michael was waiting. As she walked in, his eyes immediately found hers, his initial smile quickly settling into a look of serious, warm concern. "Emily, I'm really glad you came," he said, his voice deep and earnest. They sat and the conversation began innocuously, covering work and life updates, but it quickly spiraled back to the powerful undertow of old memories and shared history. With every story, every shared glance, Emily felt that familiar, intoxicating cocktail of confusion and yearning. She realized that no matter how hard she had tried to bury them, those old feelings were not only alive but fighting to take over. "Emily, I need to be transparent. I don't want to hide anything from you, but I need to know what you are truly feeling," Michael said, his tone serious and direct. Emily paused, trying to gather the tumultuous emotions crowding her throat. "Michael, I honestly don't know. I'm overwhelmed, but I also can't deny that there's still something in my heart for you. Michael held her gaze, his expression gentle yet unwavering. I understand, but you need to decide for yourself. If you're willing to try this again, I am all in. If not, I will respect your choice completely. Emily's heart clenched. This was the precipice, a moment that would reshape everything. Her dynamic with Michael and the bedrock of her friendship with Jack. As they talked, Emily kept cycling through her fears. Part of her yearned to see where this connection with Michael could lead, but another part dreaded the possibility of hurting Jack, her loyal and unwavering best friend. She thought of his steady eyes and his constant support. She realized that pursuing Michael's feelings could permanently damage the most important non-relationship in her life, a damage she wasn't sure she could tolerate. The moment of ultimate tension arrived when Michael placed his hand on the table, looking directly into her eyes. Emily, I need total honesty. How do you feel about Jack? The question hit Emily like a physical shock. Her heart pounded, threatening to burst from her chest. She knew she couldn't lie to Michael, but revealing the depth of her dependency on Jack felt like opening a floodgate of consequences. She sat in silence, a lump forming in her throat. She took a slow, deep breath, struggling for composure. Michael, Jack is incredibly important to me. He is my anchor. And I don't want to hurt anyone. Michael's brow furrowed, but he didn't look angry. He simply nodded, his voice low. I hear you, but you have to be clear about your own feelings, Emily. Every decision has a consequence. A profound silence descended upon their table. Only the soft jazz, the quiet clinking of tableware, and Emily's frantic pulse filled the space. She felt the intensity of the moment, but simultaneously, she recognized this as the necessary reckoning, confrontation with her own heart, her choices, and her deepest fears. Emily finally stood up, meeting Michael's gaze. I need time. I can't make a decision tonight. I need to think, to gain clarity. Michael nodded softly, his eyes full of tenderness. I'll wait, but don't let your fear drown out your true feelings. You deserve happiness, Emily. As Emily walked out of the cafe and into the late-night Manhattan mist, the streetlights leaving bright streaks on the damp pavement, she felt a powerful mix of relief and lingering confusion. She knew this was only the beginning. The decisions ahead would be agonizing, but she had dared to face her true emotions. Stepping past the fear and preparing for the next inevitable challenges, Emily walked back toward Brooklyn, her steps heavy but purposeful. The city still hummed with life, but inside her, a complex, fraught peace was settling. She realized that maturity wasn't about avoiding complicated feelings, but about facing them, understanding them, and ultimately, choosing the right path for herself. The next morning, Brooklyn awoke bathed in the soft, diffused light of a perfect autumn day. Emily woke up feeling a strange equilibrium, a mixture of light relief and persistent unease, as if her soul was hovering between two distinct worlds, one defined by stability, the other by chaotic, unresolved feelings. She sat up in bed, sipping hot coffee, gazing out the window. The pale yellow light slanted through the remaining tree canopy, shimmering on the streets still damp from the overnight rain. The gentle morning sounds of traffic began to rise from the nearby avenues. But Emily didn't rush to leave the warmth of her duvet. She took a deep breath, trying to slow the relentless churn of her mind, and keep the anxieties of last night at bay. Emily knew she needed to dedicate this day entirely to herself, to untangle the knotted thread of her thoughts. She decided on a long walk through the familiar streets, the places that held private moments and unshared memories. Her steps were slow and measured on the damp pavement. The gentle scattering of falling leaves created an atmosphere that was both lonely and profoundly peaceful. She found herself at the small independent bookstore near Prospect Park, a sanctuary where she often spent her weekends. Emily ran her fingers along the spines of the bookshelves, physically grounding herself in the presence of time, of untold stories, and of things lost and found. Each book felt like a gateway to a different memory or emotion, helping her subtly loosen the knots in her chest. She pulled out an old novel, settled into a chair near the window, and watched the busy street life unfold, absorbing the city's pulse while maintaining a rare, internal stillness. Back in her apartment, her phone buzzed. It was Jack. Coffee run. Figured a chat might help clear the air. Emily looked at the screen, a wave of familiar warmth washing over her. Jack's texts were always gentle but firm, instantly making her feel safer. She replied, "On my way. Meet you at our usual spot." As she got ready, Emily paused before the mirror. She applied a minimal, careful amount of makeup, choosing a simple yet smart dress, aiming for an image of composure. But deep in her eyes, a faint doubt lingered. Was she truly ready to face Jack and articulate the complicated truth of what was stirring inside her? When she arrived at the familiar cafe, Jack was waiting, settled in their corner booth. His eyes, full of genuine concern, lit up as he saw her. He offered a gentle smile. "You seem calmer today." Emily nodded, a slight curve touching her lips. She told Jack about her quiet morning, the sense of freedom she'd found in simply allowing herself to think and listen to her own voice. Jack listened intently, nodding occasionally, his gaze soft and completely not allowing Emily to breathe without fear of consequence. Emily realized, with startling clarity, that she absolutely needed this time to fully understand her feelings. She had to consider not only Michael, the electrifying connection from the past, but also Jack, the friend who had consistently stood by her, protected her, and cared for her without asking for anything in return. Every quiet moment, every shared look, brought a strange mix of heaviness and profound peace to her heart. Jack finally spoke, his voice low and tentative. "Have you figured anything out?" Emily shook her head gently. "Not entirely. I just know I need time. I have to understand my own feelings fully before I can commit to anything or anyone." Jack smiled, a soft, encouraging light in his eyes. "That's a massive step, Emily. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is hit the pause button so you can see the whole picture clearly." A genuine wave of relief washed over Emily. She realized that growth wasn't about immediate action, but about giving herself the space to feel, process, and make a conscious, right choice. She began to share more intimate thoughts, her anxieties, her unspoken hopes, and the fear of letting go of the stable life she had built. Jack listened, occasionally reaching out to squeeze her hand with a warm, steady touch, providing an anchor of comfort and security. After leaving the cafe, Emily walked through the sun-dappled streets of Brooklyn, a sense of quietude settling over her. She stopped in front of a colorful graffiti mural she admired. The vibrant hues and expressive lines reminded her that life was messy, vibrant, and always moving, regardless of her confusion. She took a deep breath, recognizing that she was finally starting to accept herself, her emotions, and the challenging choices that lay ahead. The most important lesson Emily learned today was this: immediate action is not always necessary. What matters more is self-awareness and recognizing one's own intrinsic worth. She knew the upcoming decisions about Michael and Jack would be difficult, but she was now ready to face them step by step, without haste or self-imposed pressure. When she returned to her apartment, Emily opened the door and looked out at the busy street bathed in the late afternoon sun. She felt lighter, as if a great weight had been momentarily lifted. But she also knew the story wasn't over. The decisions concerning Michael, Jack, and her own identity would continue to test her in the days to come. Emily placed her bag down, stepped onto her balcony, and gazed out at the vast Brooklyn landscape, where the apartment buildings reflected the pale light. She took a final deep breath, feeling that residual mix of peace and urgency. She whispered to herself, "I took a critical step today. Now, I keep moving forward, with an honest heart and a stronger spirit." Emily knew today was a turning point, not an ending. She had learned to listen to herself, to be honest about her feelings, and to grant herself the time needed to grow. She felt that every slow step on the Brooklyn sidewalk, every look exchanged with Jack, every quiet moment spent reading all were pieces fitting together to help her understand herself and the world better. She stood there for a long time, watching the streets hustle and flow, and knew that life was waiting, and she was ready to step into it, whatever came next. Emily smiled, a feeling of peaceful determination flooding her. Every upcoming step, every decision, would be an opportunity for her to grow, to love, and to choose the right path for herself. That afternoon, Brooklyn was bathed in the warm, fading light of late autumn. Emily stood before the mirror, looking at her reflection, her hand still slightly trembling as she held her phone. The message from Michael was still there, but this time she didn't rush to open it. She knew every decision was a critical move that would impact all three of them, Michael, Jack, and herself. Emily decided to take another walk through Prospect Park, a place she often sought out for clarity. The park's quiet serenity was a stark contrast to the city's hustle, momentarily lifting the pressure and allowing her heart to speak. She sat on a wooden bench, watching the golden leaves drift down, her heart heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. The phone rang. It was Jack. His voice was warm, yet serious. "Emily, I'm at the coffee shop near the park. Want to come over and talk?" Emily hesitated, then replied, "Yes, I'll be right there." She knew this conversation was a crucial turning point that could dictate her direction in the coming days. When Emily walked into the cafe, Jack was already seated, meeting her gaze with a mix of gentleness and concern. "You look stressed," Jack noted, his voice low. Emily nodded, sliding into the seat opposite him. I'm still confused," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm a mess, Jack. I genuinely don't want to hurt anyone." Jack looked at her, pausing for a moment, before speaking with measured resolve. "Emily, I get it, but you have to understand that avoiding this won't resolve anything. You need to be honest with yourself, and with us." Emily sighed, feeling the pressure mount. She knew Jack was right, but how could she be honest without causing pain to Michael and, most terrifyingly, to Jack himself? A heavy silence fell between them, punctuated only by the soft jazz music and the distant clink of mugs. Emily looked at Jack, seeing the deep concern in his eyes, but also a new, serious, edgier reminder that her choices were no longer simple or isolated. She began to recount her confusing evening with Michael, the rush of old emotions, and the struggle to find the right words. Jack listened patiently, occasionally nodding, his steady gaze providing a sense of security and freedom from judgment. "Emily, do you want to pursue things with Michael?" Jack asked, his voice steady but grave. Emily fell silent. The question landed like a heavy stone on her heart. She knew that if she followed her emotions, she risked hurting Jack. If she pulled back, she risked a lifetime of wondering about Michael. She dropped her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. I still care deeply for Michael, but I also don't want to lose you, Jack." Jack looked at her, his eyes patient and unwavering. "You have to know that love and life are rarely simple, but you also need to know that you deserve happiness. No one can make this decision for you." The cafe seemed to grow silent around them, and Emily could distinctly hear the frantic beat of her own heart. She understood that Jack's words were not a condemnation, but a gentle challenge. She needed the courage to face her true feelings, regardless of the outcome. Emily took a deep breath, fighting for composure against the overwhelming confusion. Finally, Emily sighed, looking straight into Jack's eyes. "Jack, I need more time. I need to think this through before I make any move. I don't want to rush, and I don't want to damage anything." Jack nodded, his expression softening with relief. "I understand. I'll wait. But don't forget, Emily, there is nothing wrong with being honest with yourself." They left the cafe, walking out onto the Brooklyn street where the evening lights were beginning to illuminate the skyscrapers. Emily felt a blend of relief and mounting apprehension. She knew the story wasn't over, but at least she had dared to face her anchor, admitting the confusion in her heart. With every step on the pavement, she felt the tension mixed with a growing sense of peace, as if she were standing balanced between emotional impulse and rational thought. Emily realized that true growth wasn't about immediate, but about allowing herself time to listen, to understand, and to choose wisely. She looked at the golden leaves scattered on the street, sensing the constant, forward momentum of life. Regardless of the turmoil in her heart, back in her apartment, Emily opened the door and looked out from her balcony. Brooklyn was sinking into the golden hue of twilight, the distant horns blaring, the sound of pedestrians reminding her that life goes on, and she had to move with it. She smiled, a profound sense of resolve settling over her. She knew major decisions were still ahead, but today she had dared to face her emotions, learned to be honest with herself and her closest friend. Emily stood there for a long time, taking a deep breath, absorbing the city's complex rhythm. She knew this was not the end, but she was ready to take the next steps, believing she had the strength and courage to face whatever came next. That night, Brooklyn was hushed, bathed in the soft, yellow glow of the streetlights reflecting on the damp roads. Emily stood before the mirror in her small apartment, looking at her own reflection. Her heart was still beating quickly, but the paralyzing feeling of indefinite confusion was gone. She took a deep breath, knowing that today would be the day she made her final, definitive decision. She sat down at her desk and opened her phone. Michael's last text was still visible. "I'll wait for you. But we need the truth, Emily." She paused, her fingers trembling slightly over the screen. She thought of Jack, the man who had been her unshakable anchor through every rough patch, and of Michael, the man who represented a potent, deep emotional current she had thought was lost forever. Finally, she texted Michael back, "I need to see you. We need to talk face to face, honestly and completely." Emily felt a rush of relief. Confronting Michael directly, rather than hiding behind messages or avoidance, felt like an act of necessary self. Despite the lingering anxiety, Emily met Michael at the intimate cafe where they had spent their fraught evening. The atmosphere was quiet, filled only with soft background music and the occasional clinking of cups. Michael looked at her, his eyes gentle but serious. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded, her voice steady and deliberate. "I've done a lot of thinking. I want to be completely honest with you, and with myself." She laid out all her conflicting emotions, her confusion, the depth of her dependency on Jack, the undeniable spark she still felt for Michael, and her overriding fear of hurting them both. Michael listened in silence, his eyes fixed on hers. When Emily finished, he took a deep, slow breath. "I understand, Emily. Thank you for that honesty. That couldn't have been easy, and I respect it completely." They sat for a quiet moment, a complex mix of melancholy and peace hanging between them. Emily realized that only by confronting the truth and her feelings head-on could she truly move forward. She looked at Michael, her voice trembling slightly but sincere. "Michael, I can't pursue this with you right now. I need time and space to truly understand where I am and who I am." Michael nodded, his expression softening further. "I get it. I'll wait. But more importantly, you need to be happy, Emily. Whatever decision you make, I respect it." As she left the cafe, Emily immediately called Jack. Her voice was calm and warm. "Jack, I need to see you." Jack immediately replied, "I'm in Prospect Park. Meet me here." Emily gripped her purse tightly. Stepping onto the Brooklyn street, feeling a surge of both relief and nervous anticipation. In the park, Jack looked at her with unwavering concern. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded, her voice low but sure. "I've thought everything through. I realized my heart still needs time to settle, but I want you in my life, Jack. Not out of fear or obligation, but because I truly value you." Jack smiled gently, a look of profound relief and quiet joy lighting up his eyes. "Emily, I'm so happy to hear you say that. I promise to keep respecting your feelings, and we'll figure out the rest together, one step at a time." They stood there in the fading twilight, a sense of profound peace settling over them, as if all the anxiety, confusion, and fear had finally dissipated. Emily realized that maturity wasn't about making quick decisions, but about understanding her emotions, being honest with herself, and having the courage to choose. She understood that love was complex, but by facing the truth, she could find her own path to happiness. In the following days, Emily focused on herself and on nurturing her stable relationship with Jack. They took walks, talked deeply, and shared the small, comforting moments of their daily lives. Michael remained a presence in her heart, but no longer a burden. Instead, he was a memory, a necessary experience for growth and self-discovery. One evening, Emily stood on her apartment balcony, looking out at the glittering lights of Brooklyn. She felt the city's pulse, but more importantly, she felt the steady rhythm of her own heart, stable, resolute, and free. She knew life would bring more challenges, but with self-honesty, courage, and genuine connection, she could face anything. Emily smiled, her eyes bright with hope and clarity. She knew that today, she had found the vital balance between her heart and her mind, finding her own true self and her own version of happiness, ready to move forward. And so, amid the bright lights and relentless motion of Brooklyn, Emily had resolved her heart's conflict, learning that honesty, courage, and self-love are always the keys to growth and a life truly lived.